Good afternoon, and thank you everyone for joining us for another segment of the Jane Irrigation Training Series. And I'm really excited today because every once in a while we get a little out of the irrigation box, and we're doing that today. And we're going to talk about the Outdoor Power Equipment Institute, OPEI. And I'll tell you the reason why we're meeting with them and talking with them is it was a group a few years ago I didn't have a lot of exposure to. And then a friend of mine and former editor for Lawn and Landscape magazine, Chuck Bowen, moved over there. And boy, I started talking to Chuck about his job and the institute and everything they do for businesses. And I started to see this is an industry that is being supported in a big way by this institute. And a lot of us in the landscape industry weren't that aware of it. So what they're able to do is really help us build better businesses. And so we're very fortunate today to have Kris, President and CEO, with us today. And Kris has been an advocate and been working in advocacy for a lot of years and helped a lot of different industries. And we're really fortunate to have him working for our industry now because, you know, outdoor power equipment does come under a lot of pressure now and then, and having the right people supporting us and doing the right thing for our industry is really key. So Kris, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. And boy, I think a great place to start for all our viewers is, you know, what is the OPEI?
We're a trade association. We're in metropolitan Washington, D.C. Much like the Irrigation Association, we have a number of members. We represent their interests before legislatures, regulatory authorities, and others. We're also a SDO, a standards development organization in the safety standards creations business. Now, a lot of our stuff, some folks might say you've got to be careful about it. It might be inherently dangerous. Mowers, chainsaws, trimmers, portable generators, golf cars, UTVs. So we're intimately involved in creating safety standards for those products, manufacturer-based ANSI standards. So that's a lot of work. ANSI standards, statistics collection. We have a very granular statistics program that we provide our members in addition to the advocacy. We're obviously a communication shop on behalf of the members. But again, fundamentally, we represent manufacturers of outdoor power equipment and their suppliers. Again, they're mower manufacturers, snow thrower manufacturers, chainsaw manufacturers, and we own GIE+EXPO, the big trade show in Louisville, Kentucky every year.
Yeah, so I want to talk about that expo because what you just said, I don't think a lot of people are aware of. A lot of my peers, we all go to the show, but we weren't really aware of how much you guys had to do with that. So now getting back to what you guys do, and on the advocacy side or even on the educational side, I mean, there's so many different products that you guys are representing and parts of our industry. How in the world do you guys figure out where to focus your efforts first?
Well, you know, we have a lot of it's budget driven, but we're a regulated industry. So a lot of on the engine product side, say it's emissions, right? So the emissions regulatory work in front of EPA and the California Air Resources Board. On the safety side of the equation, we represent our manufacturers in front of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Lots and lots of interaction with that particular agency. And so this is our history. Again, is creating safe products, representing their interests before regulatory authorities, legislative matters as well, and in particular education, right? We have some safety stuff. We have the TurfMutt Foundation. We try to educate kids about the outdoors, being stewards of the outdoors. And importantly, on the equipment side, again, that forum we created 40 years ago. Expo is an old show. Yeah. But it's a viable show and it's a growing show. But we created Expo 40 years ago so that landscape contractors and others interested parties, dealers, et cetera, could actually see the equipment. And unlike a lot of shows, it's not just see it. We give you 20 acres out back that you can go rip, tear, dig, drive, what have you, and actually experiencing the equipment. And so it's a unique thing that OPEI does.
Yeah, I think about that and I think, well, if I'm a landscaper and I want to test out several different mowers, for example, I have a hard time traveling around town and doing that. But if I can go to one expo and actually use them, ride them, test them all in one place, this is really unique. It's a unique thing that you guys do at the show.
Well, there's a lot of peer-to-peer opportunities. So there's a lot of education programming that we do, our partners do at the show, experiences beyond. And so we give them opportunities to socialize with one another, learn from one another. There's a lot of peer-to-peer activity that happens at the show that we try to incentivize. Again, it's where I call it a family reunion.
Yeah.
I've done it now for 14 years. And it feels like that. You see, we have 100 member companies. We have 1,000 exhibitors. And so you see the same folks in the business. And every year we get a lot of new people, landscape contractors, irrigation professionals. And so it's always a great, interesting mix. There's a lot of fun stuff in addition to the work. So one of the challenges, as you know, we've got 1 million square feet. Yeah. So it takes a lot of time. You need comfortable shoes and a jacket to cover the space, but we want to keep it innovative, and that's why we love talking to folks like you.
Yeah. So you said that you guys own the show. What does that mean? And tell us a little bit about that.
About 40 years ago, the city of Louisville and the state of Kentucky was engaged talking with members of the corporate members of my association, said, and discussed it. Now, like the farm show, Kentucky actually owns that, the state of Kentucky and the KEC, Kentucky Venues. We created that show 40 years ago at that facility, and it's grown ever since. Now, 12 years ago now, we partnered with both the National Association of Landscape Professionals and PGMS, professional grounds care folks, in a partnership. Now, that partnership has run its course. 2021 will be the last year of that partnership. So there's enormous opportunity now for us in 2-2 as we launch again a new show that OPEI will own in its entirety, continue to work with PGMS, other landscape groups, other landscape associations. We love our NALP partners, but everything got so big. So NALP had landscapes downtown, an education kind of conference. We had ours. And so we did hear from a lot of landscape contractors. There was just so much that to do. And so what we hope to do in 2-2 is better coordinate our education offerings at the KEC, utilize some of the buildings there, Freedom Hall, Broadbent, the West Wing, and create a program that has better synergy with our show hours so people can do more in the time they have.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I just want to remind everybody too that we have the chat and the Q&A open. So if you have some questions that you'd like me to pass on to Kris, put them in the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be happy to do that when appropriate. So we're in the middle of COVID now. Things are getting maybe even dicier, tougher. Yeah. You guys had to take your show and not postpone it, but make it virtual this year, right? So tell us a little bit about that decision and what's happening with that now.
Yeah, Expo to Go. Now, it's not per se a virtual show. What we've done is create an online offering whereby folks can essentially see a lot of a manufacturer's equipment that they might have had available at Expo, and we redirect them. Actually, we just passed the 40,000 threshold mark. So we have 20,000 unique visitors, over 40,000 visits. So it's actually been a pretty good, it's actually been a pretty good, engaging digital effort. Remember, we've got 1,000 exhibitors, thousands and thousands of products. A lot of new products were coming up this year. There's some new trends in the business. So there really was some interest. Now, also manufacturers lost a lot of their dealer meetings because of COVID. So there really was this demand. Now, for us, it's a bridge. We very, very much hope, and we believe that 2-1, that we'll be able to get back together. The signs we see already is 21 looks actually to be a pretty big year. An awful lot of manufacturers have rolled those monies over. We collected a lot of monies from exhibitors for 2020. And what they've done is roll that forward. And we've now dealing with a lot of requests to expand their space. So there's a lot of pent up demand to get together. There's a lot of education need to learn from COVID. There are a lot of people that did really well. There's some people that didn't do well. Let's learn from that. And manufacturers have a lot of new product. And so we expect a big year this year.
Yeah.
In 21, next year.
Right. So somebody wants to participate today in your show to go, that they can do that today, right?
Absolutely. Expo2go.com, or you go to the GIE+EXPO site. It'll redirect you, or you can direct from there. But yes, it's an online offering. Now we're going to keep that going. We've noticed that it's successful. It's a good way to interact with 20,000 people. And so we're going to try to find a way to make sure that online setup stays viable and lets us engage with our partners and our exhibitors and our attendees on a year-round basis. We have so much information and education and product offerings, et cetera, that we do need to communicate throughout the year.
Right. So do I go and sign up at that website? Does it cost money? How does all that work?
The website's free. So engaging at Expo to Go is completely free. You can go see a lot of different manufacturers from that site. As you know, the registration fees at GIE+EXPO are very, very modest, the attendee fees. And you can register now for Expo. We encourage you to do so, to come to Expo 2021. We see light at the end of the tunnel.
Right. But I can still do the show today virtually all the way probably into next year. Is that right?
Absolutely. It'll likely be a year-round effort.
Yeah, it's really cool. You know, another opportunity for education, right? And this is the thing we're always missing, or we hear about, right? Is there's not enough opportunities for education. And this one's online to do after work, on the weekends, when you're having a rainy day. It's just there for you.
Now we want you, the Irrigation Association, you guys do some education programming at Expo. We're delighted to have you do that. We hopefully can expand that now going forward. And like, for example, dealing with a couple of years ago, I was having meeting the CEO of Davey Tree, and a lot of landscape contractors were looking to diversify and broaden what it is they do, right? So some of them are doing some modest tree work, not arborist work, but some modest tree work so that they could keep, part of it was labor retention, so they could keep their people year round, keep them busy year round. And so I was talking to the CEO of Davey Tree, and he says, we love this event. We come every year. All these wonderful, exhibitions are here and the ability to get outside. But what you don't have is a big tree where we can learn, because we have a little tree inside. I'm like, well, how big a tree do you need? And he's like, like a 60-foot tree. And I'm like, done. We'll get you a tree. And the following year, and it was indoors. So we worked with Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky, went out and cut down a 70-foot maple, put it on a flatbed, drove it onto the floor of Freedom Hall and erected it. We had Women in Trees last year and all kinds of wonderful education. That's the kind of show we want to be. So if you come to us and say, we need this kind of education or we need this kind of programming, there's nothing we can't do with that facility and our resources. So we're open to ideas. Women in Trees is back next year in an expanded program. And so that's the nice thing about Expo. There's usually something different every year.
Yeah, can't wait to get back there and A, see everybody, but B, see all these things, right? It's really, you can spend a lot of time there and not see everything. One
more. So the UTV, we represent UTV manufacturers. And we have all those outdoor areas. Now that's pretty good. That's fine for chainsaws and mowers, but we did have a big UTV manufacturer say, this is good and we can get a little bit of space, but a UTV, people really want to drive it, right? Yeah. And what we don't have is a track. And I'm like, well, how big a track you want? So, a mile, done. And so we're putting together a big UTV track now all around the outdoors, bound down through those horse barns. Again, because that's such a wonderful facility. So that we're going to do drone training. We had some people say, hey, if you're doing trees, one of the things that we need drones, and a lot of landscapers now use drones. So Indiana State University has a drone education program. They actually have a degree in it. So they're going to come down. We're going to do drone training. We got a waiver from the FAA. And so we have drone training this year.
That's fabulous. That's I really appreciate that you guys get out of the box and think about this. And, these are all the new things that contractors need to be thinking about, right? To stay competitive, to stay ahead of the competition. And it's really great to get that assistance.
And that's, again, you're going to get it at Expo. Again, we love our retailers and we love our dealer bodies, but there's no one place where you can get it all. And it's also technology, right? Software. What's the latest software? What's the latest in robotics? What's the latest in interconnected product? Well, it'll all be there. Lots and lots of new battery product, lots and lots of new stuff. A lot good electronic fuel injection, innovation, new stuff on the engine side, all at Expo.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Now, something else you guys do that I'm really interested in and really admire, right? Another thing that was kind of out of the box that I think a lot of business people can learn from is your TurfMutt Foundation. Tell us a little bit about TurfMutt Foundation, where it came from. I know we've got your dog running around in the background a little bit. It seems to have quieted down, so people aren't getting that opportunity to see your dog. But let's hear about the foundation.
Yeah, she's used to Zoom meetings. She's usually in here participating, but they go on a long time. You know, TurfMutt's near and dear to my heart. Shortly after joining OPEI in 2007, EPA came out with a program with some other regulators, and they wanted to limit the living landscape. They basically said it was a water-based, look, it was well-intentioned. We want to save water, right? So, but we can save water by limiting the living landscape or limiting turf grass. And I thought they had that backwards. How we manage water, how we manage the landscape is the issue. The plants themselves aren't. And the plants that once established, right plant, right place, they're going to be fine, you know, if they're native to their area, et cetera. And so what I wanted to do was educate folks. And it's look, I'm an old lawyer, lobbyist, nobody listens to me. But how can you, and I did it in the paper industry, we created a recycling program for kids because manufacturers wanted that raw material back. And we created a recycling program in the early 90s, which is in use today. And so we came up with TurfMutt. You know, TurfMutt is a cartoon character, battles bad guys, heat freak. That's the heat island effect. Dr. Runoff, those are runoff issues. Carbon creep, that's climate change, carbon sequestration. Our lawns are the largest carbon sink in the country. So 4 bad guys, TurfMutt was this cartoon superhero, but behind that superhero, it was a dog, right? So we developed education programming, curriculum around those themes: heat freak, dust demon, carbon creep, Dr. Runoff. And the kids love the bad guys, of course. Right. So we created curriculum with Weekly Reader. We went into a couple hundred schools in Sacramento, California, and Washington, D.C., and it took. So we went back into the schools, and it grew and grew, and then the Discovery came to us. The Discovery Education people, Discovery Channel, said, hey, we like that dog thing. So we went into schools with Discovery. It grew and grew and grew. And then the world's largest curriculum provider, Scholastic, came to us 3 or 4 years ago and said, hey, we want to put that program in our schools. So we went with Scholastic. 70 million kids, teachers, and families have used TurfMutt. I mean that. That's their number, not mine.
Right.
And we're now in the Global Learning Lab of the United States Green Building Council and at the very website, EPA, Interior, Education, with the very people that had some of these ideas we were thought not well-intentioned. And so when the California drought became a real problem a couple of years ago, TurfMutt was ready. So we've done some TV, Lucky Dog, CBS, Saturday mornings, education programming, Ready, Set, Pet on the CW. But what really, again, near and dear to my heart, and again, I'll tie it back to Expo, is we used a real dog, right? So the dog behind the superhero character, Clark Kent is Superman, Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Well, Lucky the TurfMutt is a real dog. And he was a rescue dog, and he was my dog. So he was with me at a communications shop down in the city one day under this, and we said, would he wear a cape as part of the? And so we tied a tablecloth on him. He was a huge ham, and it took. And so he did a lot of TV, a lot of work. He's been on 5 networks, and he passed at 14 last year at the TurfMutt offices. And so we have a new dog adopted at Lucky's Mutt Madness at GIE+EXPO last year. So we now have a new spokes dog for the foundation. Now, my board, when we got this together, and I'll be quiet here in a second, they were like, because I believed in this idea. And they said, if you'll just shut up, we'll give you money. Because I was pitching it. And it took. And so we went to them a couple of years ago and said, look, we want to paw it forward for all rescue dogs. And we want to create, and we're the people that create the living landscape, and we create yards, and we are the folks behind it. And so we partnered with the Kentucky Humane Society. We came up with Mutt Madness. We put it in Freedom Hall on Thursdays. And so we now rescue dogs at Expo during the show. So if you need your next best friend, come to Expo and we'll set you up.
Yeah, it's really phenomenal. And one thing, I love making the connection to the kids, right? And we know that marketing to young people works, right? Coke, Pepsi, Chevy, Ford, you're one or the other. And it usually starts when you're very young. And so teaching kids about sustainability, water management, carbon, It's really cool that you guys do this, and then to see how it leapfrogged out and just got better and better is really great to see. And I think we're always struggling to figure out, we know what the right things to do are. How do we communicate this message to more people? 70 million kids, that's incredible.
Again, that's our education partners number. Now, granted, we don't create the curriculum. We have the idea, we have the character, we have the baseline, but it has to be legit, right? So
Right.
these people in science, the science teachers groups, it's STEM education. They come up with a program. We tailor it and retool it every year. And it's told from a dog's point of view. And that's kind of how it hit me. I was watching my dog in the yard.
Yeah.
And he knows where the fox came in and where the possum's been and where the chipmunks are. Nobody knows your yard better.
Right.
So no one can speak to, butterfly bushes and pollinator support and the value of turf grass like your pooch.
Right.
And that's what makes it sticky for a kid. It's all backpack programming. So the kids take it home to their parents. Now, in this COVID business, we saw an extraordinary reconnect to the outdoors. So the extension of home, right? That outdoor space became an extension of home. It's safe space, extraordinary growth now. It's been a terrible year for a lot of folks, but it's been a banner year in the consumer space for outdoor power equipment because people are reconnecting and they're getting outdoors at home.
Yeah, so I want to finish up with TurfMutt, and then I do want to talk about this, right? Because what's happening in our industry is really, really unusual. So TurfMutt lives where today? Where is TurfMutt?
TurfMutt, there's the spokesdog of TurfMutt is Mulligan. She's known as Mutt Mulligan, adopted there at GIE+EXPO. Everybody calls her Momo. So Mutt Mulligan became Mully, and then it became Momo. So she lives here, and she's something. My other dog was a bit of a road warrior. So he went to a lot of schools. The TurfMutt has a big annual contest. We award monies. We create outdoor classrooms at schools. He went to a lot of those. He filmed a lot of episodes with CBS on Lucky Dog. Lucky Dog, it's all about dog adoption. And we were helping folks create an outdoor space appropriate for their region, whether it was here in the mid-Atlantic. The longest trip we drove him on was out to Jefferson City, Missouri, so that they had the right kind of home for the family and the dog. And that all weaves together, right? And so again, that's the platform. The education platform is the dog and the yard and the kids and family. But we weave in a lot of messages along the way.
Right.
It's how to be a steward, wise water use, right? Pollinator support, all the kinds of things we need. And especially with people buying houses today, they want to know that that lawn or landscape is purposeful. It's not just aesthetic, and it's not a one size fits all. You can tailor your lawn or landscape to fit your needs. And that's what we want folks to do.
Yeah, it's the right message, right?
Yep.
So then let's talk a little bit about COVID and the year. I think that most landscapers, like you said, most of them, or a good portion of them, have had maybe a good year, a great year, maybe their best year. Do you see this continuing? Would you agree with that people are having good years? And what do you think about the future here?
Richard, I would. And it's funny, I had a call last night with a couple of my executive committee members, big CEOs of these companies. They think this reconnection to the outdoors and families to their lawns, landscapes, and their outdoor spaces. So hardscapes in there too. The outdoor room has really taken that. It's rooted. It's reconnected people the way they saw decades ago. They don't think this is a flash in the pan. They think people genuinely have reconnected. Yards have never looked better. Granted, we've had a good weather year, but folks are in their outdoor space and there's lots and lots of plantings. I did a TV piece on how do you keep all these new plantings that aren't necessarily established alive through the winter. But people have really reconnected. We've sold, it's been a banner year for my industry in the consumer side. Now, some of the big landscape jobs we think have been put on hold, but by and large, again, I talk regularly with our landscape contractor partners in NALP, et cetera. They're having a pretty good year.
Yeah.
These outdoor spaces are critically important. You know, we were an essential part. We were deemed essential early on. Now, granted, in the first quarter, when COVID first hit, we were very, very concerned, right? That it was going to be very, very challenging. But everyone rose to the occasion. We needed to create safe space. You know, we were hunkering down at home. So the nice thing about your yard is, you know, you can have a staycation. You can camp, you can have a fire pit, you can have games, you can do whatever. And the other thing we did early on, Richard, and again, this is close to my heart. I'm very involved in dog adoption, rescue, and rehab. We encouraged people to foster dogs, along with a lot of other voices, right?
Yeah.
But we encouraged a lot of people to foster dogs. If you're all going to be home and you're stuck at home, why not have a friend, do your part? Because people can't get out to the shelters, so foster dog at home. The shelters were emptied out.
Right.
Blown away. Those dogs, a lot of those dogs have found homes, so that's near and dear to my heart. And TurfMutt, we fought forward. But we think that's here to stay. And so my companies are pretty energized by it. And so a lot of folks now are like, okay, I'm doing a lot of this work myself. So there's people interested in, I think it's probably gonna be the biggest chainsaw year ever.
Yeah.
If we get a little snow, we're pretty sure we're gonna have a big snow throw year. But walk behinds, mowers, the consumer side of the equation, banner year.
Now, what about the supply of this power equipment? Is it there, or are some of our dealers running out of product right now?
There are a handful of units that are challenging to find, right? So some of the new stuff, as you might suspect, everybody wants the new stuff. But some of the new stuff, some of the big battery units, some of the, there's now a fuel injected engine chainsaw. So some of the new stuff might be a little tough to find. But by and large, the manufacturers have really stepped it up. Now, granted, they went in again, they were deemed essential. And so they found ways to keep the factories operating safely in transportation and retail, right? We could, because Home Depot and Lowe's stayed open, right?
Yeah, right.
And so the dealers and big retail moved a lot of this product. People were looking for things to do. So by and large, most of the equipment is available. The companies have run, this is a problem they like to have, inventory shortages. And so they're producing the products people need. They're out there.
Yeah. So cool. And then, equipment, this is especially technology and equipment. This is something I really love, and a lot of our viewers love as well. Thinking down the road and in the future, am I going to have something automatic, robotic mowing my lawn someday? I mean, what do you think about that?
It'll certainly be an option for you. I remember, 4 or 5 years ago now, I remember I love going to Expo because I'm there before, when it's an empty room, right? It's just concrete, and then to watch it build. And I remember seeing my first robot, my first little mower robot. And somebody said, that's not going to take, it was a European thing. That'll never work here. Oh, no. I'm like, I don't know. Americans love new stuff. They love their technology and robotics. And we're at Expo last year. So first one manufactured, then two, then three. What'd you have last year? 40 that had robotics and or, parts or supplies for robotics. This year, and now you're seeing these huge commercial robots. Echo and Husqvarna, very, the size of an Audi. I mean, very large commercial robots. Oftentimes because of this labor situation for universities and corporate campuses and sports fields. So no, robotics is really growing, plus interconnected product, right? The software, et cetera. So no, you'll be able to have machines, mowers right now, that you can operate from your phone. Now, a lot of landscapers are in that business. They can come to your home, install a system for you. They own it, they maintain it. We're seeing very significant growth on the robotic side because that lawn looks perfect. That robot runs every day. It doesn't mow, it shaves the grass. And so, no, we think it's a growth sector. Certainly, when we have an OPEI developed the first ever U.S. robotic mower standard, which I think we debuted 18 months ago. And so we think it's here to stay. Yeah, interesting. So,
the other thing that's happening a lot, I think, is the electric powered equipment.
Oh my gosh.
Eight years ago, I did a bid for the Google campus up in the Bay Area, and their number one requirement was everything has to be electric powered, or no gas powered.
Right.
Are we starting to see more of this, and how's the industry responding to that?
Absolutely. Lithium ion technology has allowed that to flourish, right? So I remember, was it 2 years ago, I did my first Lithium Z zero turn mower. I think it was a Gravely, and it was a rocket, right? It's like a Tesla. They just take off. And obviously they're quiet, but we also have one of my staff members is on the Department of Transportation Battery Committee, DOT. Batteries have challenges themselves, right? Shipping, transportation, recycling, et cetera. So they too will have their issues, but no. And we've seen dramatic demand and sales on the consumer side. It's just now filtering into the commercial side, but there are a lot of big commercial units that manufacturers make with batteries. And again, lithium's allowed to do that. I know for sure that you're going to see a lot of new lithium Zs, big lithium zero turn mowers. I think will be another big new trend at Expo. There's a lot of them waiting in the wings.
Yeah, oh, that's very interesting. That's very cool. I think, to see this technology pick up, make it better for all our lives.
Absolutely. And same thing with chainsaws. You need a lot of torque, a lot of power with a chainsaw. And so some of these pieces of equipment were slow, but now you can buy a very, very powerful chainsaw unit that's battery powered. Now, again, I represent manufacturers of propane, gas, diesel, electric. We love them all. And so what we like to say is there's a product for you. So whatever your interests are, whatever your needs, commercial or consumer, there's a product and a price point for you. And that's why you go to Expo, because they're all there.
Yeah. So, Kris, I want to ask you, if I'm a landscape contractor somewhere in the U.S., are there any legislative issues that I should keep on my radar, to check on every once in a while that may impact?
You bet. Inevitably, there's somebody that doesn't like something that's happening. We see it a lot with leaf blowers. It's obviously cyclical, and product bans, right? Where a municipality, typically these are at the local level, municipal level, well, they'll try to limit use of a particular product. And we don't want there to be bans. Most of this is behavior. Don't run 5 of these units at the same time. Don't run them at 7 in the morning. All the kinds of things that are commonsensical. And that's what we try to do, is educate people about the use. But manufacturers are very attuned to this, right? And so they're making product that's quieter. They're making product that's more efficient. They're making product. And so we want to, again, say there's something for everyone. But on the equipment side, local regulations. And again, we're regulated equipment. So starting the early 90s on the emissions side. And so most of the standards related stuff and the emissions related stuff is part of why we exist. The newer the equipment, the most advanced it's going to be, the better emissions, that sort of thing. It'll be the safest possible unit. So we encourage people, as you might suspect, to go out and buy new product.
Yeah. And I think too, and so this is a question, but I think they'll pay more for better, quieter equipment. Is this right? I mean, do you guys find that?
Sure. Now, several of the big CEOs at NALP, I know very well over the years, and they'll say in your neck of the woods, a municipality or community may go to one of these big landscape shops and say, hey, we want an all electric sort of crew, or we want an electric bid. Right. Now, what he'll do is say, I can do it, but right now the price point and the run times, et cetera, there are a lot of variables, is I give you one price for all electric and one price for whatever, for gasoline, if you will. And he says there's still a significant differential on the commercial side. Right. And he says, but that's changing. And so you're beginning to see hybrids, you're beginning to see a mix of equipment, you're beginning to see portable generators, we represent those as well, going out on the trucks or the trailers, and they'll run a generator to charge the batteries. But these are machines that run all day, sometimes very challenging conditions. They got to go 8-10 hours, so you're going to have to swap batteries. But we're seeing parity. We're starting to see now, it's just like the automobile industry, right? The first electric cars were crazy expensive. They needed tax credits, et cetera, to get going. Same thing on our side. The early units were expensive, but now you really are seeing parity.
Yeah, which reminds me, that's a good question. We do see tax credits for electric cars. Do we see it for electric power equipment for some of these contractors?
Not widespread. You'll see it in select communities. A lot of California stuff. Now, California has a unique, air issue, and the California Air Resources Board, so it has its own regulatory authority. So we see it in California. We see it in New England, where a municipality may incentivize the trade-in or transfer of one kind of product to another. But it's typically very localized to communities that are dealing with specific problems.
Yeah, so that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see when that changes, right? Because certainly that's a good way to get a lot of consumers over the hump.
Well, and because batteries are now, there's more and more of them, people are understanding the real world implications. So a battery has an X runtime, but if you're running it in the cold and you're running it in tall grass or wet grass or on a hill, you're going to pull the load, right? So there are a lot of variables with batteries. What are the conditions under which they're operating? So as consumers better understand the capabilities of each, you'll start to see people buying what they need, gas this and a propane that and a electric this. And that's what we're starting to see. People really understanding and trial running different kinds of equipment.
Yeah. And it's, yeah, when was in the contracting business, everything about electric was the battery and the power, and plan your process so you have a full charge at this point of your day, because you can really upset, how your day is going to end depending on that battery planning.
And manufacturers, you've seen it where a manufacturer will put the same battery system in all their products, right? So chainsaw, pole pruner, trimmer, shredder, mower, and they're all interchangeable. And you stack them. So I've seen big units, a big commercial unit, say a backpack blower, and then you put batteries in a waistband, or you stack them again in a backpack for a handheld. So manufacturers have figured out how to do that. But there are trade-offs, right? So you've got to figure out what is that trade-off. But more and more of that is certainly happening. And again, technology now is flying. And so the technological piece of it, it's like the tree. We put a tree up and these chainsaws, and then they say, well, now we got to do drones, right? So, okay, we'll put in drones and they're automated. Then we need the software. And again, I'm going to plug my show one more time. It's one of the reasons you go to Expo, because you can see all of that in one place, and you can actually fly the drones. So these are the kinds of things we want people to experience, as well as going to irrigation education training and landscaper training. Is all of these emerging technologies are in one spot.
Yeah. So thank you, Kris. I'm going to drop your name at Expo and say, Kris said I could fly the drone. Hey, we're almost at our end of time, and I was just thinking, it is kind of the end of the year. People are thinking about planning next year and getting excited about next year. And we've got a lot changing as well. Any last pieces of advice for the contractors out there that you'd like to pass on to have a good, successful 2021?
Yeah, we're very heartened by the current situation with this vaccine business. We have a lot of folks on the Hill and in some of the agencies, and we're pretty well connected to what's happening. We do believe there's light at the end of the tunnel. It's been a very tough situation for a lot of folks, but we do believe, and we're going forward. And so my annual meeting, a decision was made literally last night for June, for the third week of June in Kohler. So my OPEI will have its annual meeting. We're going to move forward because we think the vaccine work and placement will be in place, that we can get back to a near normal, or let's call it today's normal. And it may mean mask, it may mean whatever, but we have to get back to work in whatever environment we find ourselves. Now, we'll do it safely and responsibly, but we're really convinced now that we'll be able to do a brick and mortar in-person expo. And literally I had a call yesterday with NALP. There's pent up demand. And so I would encourage you, if you're going to come to the 2021 show, get your hotel early, get your registrations early, get your plane tickets early, because we think it'll be a big show. Manufacturers have a lot of equipment to show. There's a lot of pent up need to get back out there. It's, I think, a safe way to travel. It's a safe show to undertake, right? We can have the airflow we need. A lot of it's outdoors. So we're very comfortable. And so we look forward to having our family reunion again in October of 21. And we hope you and your friends at the Irrigation Association and group will come and see us as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, because you can probably get some pretty good early deals as well. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. So very, very good, very smart advice. Gosh, thank you so much for coming on and spending this time with us today. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back in a few months. We'd love to hear how the year's going. And as we get into 21, you've been really helpful. I want to be sure to thank everybody who's watching today for spending for a lot of you, your lunchtime with us. We really appreciate that. And please don't forget, you can see all these videos on the Janes USA website. And we're also on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. Just have to search for Jane Irrigation Training and you'll find us there as well. Kris, again, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. My pleasure.
Okay. Bye now. Thank you.
You bet.